Good morning, everyone. Do you know what a Stalinist show trial was? Okay, here it is. A show trial is a public trial in which the judicial authorities have already determined the guilt and or innocence of the defendant. The actual trial has its only goal the presentation of both the accusation and the verdict to the public, so they will serve as both an impressive example and a warning to other would-be dissidents or transgressors. Show trials tend to be retributive rather than coercive, and they are also conducted for propagandistic purposes. Okay, so retribution is after, right? Punishment. Coercive is getting you to do something. Okay, just in case you're not sure. All right, and here is the interesting story of Michael Korenberg. And Michael Korenberg used to be the UBC, the chair of the board of governors of UBC, and he tweeted, "Today I step down as chair of the board of governors of UBC. I owe all students, faculty, and staff, and all those who stand against all forms of discrimination an apology. I do so with all my heart." And here's his apology. I'm going to read it, and because it's important to understand what's going on, and I'm going to tell you what's happening here. I'm going to explain this because I finally figured it out. And I'll show you the definition of racism everybody's operating by suddenly. Okay? It's changed. Maybe you knew this, but I didn't know this. So the definition of racism has definitely changed recently. Anyway, back to Mr. Korenberg. Okay. Korenberg. That's it, right? Korenberg. Okay. As chair of the board of governors of UBC, there's nothing I've cared about more than the well-being of students, faculty, and staff, the pursuit of the university's academic mission, and the betterment of society. It was a responsibility I took seriously, but one I did not uphold recently. Over the past 2 weeks, some articles, statements that I liked on Twitter supported regressive voices and took aim at thousands of brave individuals who are standing up against racism, discrimination, and hatred. While I do not support violence of any kind, I understand how my actions created questions about who I am and what I believe. To be clear, I support Black Lives Matter and I support the de-radicalization of our educational institutions and our country. But I accept that in liking these social media posts, I damaged what I support and that I hurt people. I wholeheartedly apologize to them, particularly to the students, faculty, and staff of UBC. I've stepped down because it is the right thing to do. Racism in our country is real, and I want to be part of the solution, not a distraction to the voices who are working so hard for change. The students, faculty, and staff of UBC come first. I have always believed this, and I always will. I'm committed to ensuring that I continue to advocate for human rights in my professional and personal life, and to never be above learning myself. Sincerely, Michael Korenberg. Okay, so that is the former board of governors, former chair of the board of governors of UBC. Here is the military. CP24 reporting June 22nd. This was tweeted out just so you're aware yesterday as well. Oh no, June 20th. June 20th. Today's the 22nd. This is put out today by CP24. Defense leaders apologize for slow response to racism as forces investigate meme. Canada's top military and civilian defense officials have apologized, not responding sooner to questions about systemic racism in the Department of National Defense and Canadian Armed Forces. The apology is contained in a letter written by Defense Department Deputy Minister Jody Thomas and Chief of Defense Staff General Jonathan Vance, and distributed to troops and Defense Department employees on Friday. The letter coincides with a wave of anti-racism demonstrations and sentiment in the U.S. and Canada following the killing of an unarmed black man, George Floyd, in the U.S. by white police officers last month. Thomas and Vance go on to reveal the military police are investigating reports of a service member spreading anti-black pictures in Quebec. They also acknowledge that racism is a real problem many Defense Department and military members experience on a daily basis, and that past efforts to curb it have been unsuccessful. Federal Black Employees Caucus co-founder Richard Sharp, who met with Thomas and Vance last week, described the letter as historic and expressed optimism about the military's genuine desire to eliminate racism from the ranks. So these stories, I was tagging them yesterday, and it started churning in my head, and I've been watching. I think I talked about the Upper Grand District Board. This is one more first. In the Bloc Québécois MP, and this is Press Progress, so this is in Montreal, I believe, or Quebec publication. Bloc Québécois MP who killed anti-racism motion promoted blog claiming Muslims invented Islamophobia. Blog opposed Quebec Solidaire's 2015 anti-Islamophobia motion. Okay, and here it is, the 2015 In October 2015, Theron promoted a blog by André Lemeru, a Université de Quebec Montreal professor known for controversial anti-Muslim views, once characterizing Islam as a cancer. So they go back into today's like 2020. That was 5 years ago. They go back in time to say, see, racist. Well, we've gotcha, right? And the as I said, the definition of racist has changed, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But first, I wanted you to see. This is the Upper Grand District School Board. We're going to watch all of this. I hope that the volume is right. And I know it's a little bit long, but I feel like the whole thing is worthwhile. She's talking about critical race theory, and I have some questions that I'll ask you guys after this, but man, do I have questions about this. And this ties all the racism stuff together because I think this is the modus operandi. I think critical race theory is the modus operandi by which they're governing the other stuff by. Like they're using this as the measuring stick across the board. And the reason that I realize this is because I watched this public meeting, and my jaw was on the floor. I think you'll be surprised, but maybe not. I don't know. Maybe I'm just surprised by this, and you will be. Oh yeah, this is normal and okay. Okay, here we go. This is 2 minutes of a public board meeting on June 16th about inclusivity, racism, and what the board is doing instead. And there's a link to the whole thing in the description. So I don't want to mislead anybody. You draw your own conclusions to this. I didn't even put a comment about what I thought about it. I do put my questions in there though. Okay, here we go.
Collected that information, we'll build a learning plan, and part of that is based on the work that we've already been doing. Jessica and Cheryl and I have already been doing lots of work over the past years. And so what we want to do is make sure that we're grounding it in critical race theory. And so we'll be giving folks some training to make sure that everyone understands what the language says. Briefly, what critical race theory was developed by lawyers, and what it says is that we understand that race is a social construct, and that the systems that we are working in presently in education, they were specifically talking about law, but it's the same application, that because the systems were all developed by folks who were white, that they are inherently a racist in that. And so what I think people get really confused when we talk about racism and often defensive is that they often look at racism based on an individual. So we're not talking here about individual acts of racism, because we may not see that. What we're looking at, though, is how is the system itself, the overarching structures and practices and procedures and policies, racist. And if anyone has heard of Dr. Ibram Kendi, he wrote a book that's based on critical race theory, and it's called How to Be an Anti-Racist. And in the book, he says that policies are never neutral, that nothing is neutral. It is either explicitly anti-racist or it's upholding white supremacy and therefore racist. So it's, I think folks get confused because they think that there's a middle ground of neutrality, and there's not. So that's the language that's going to be part of the plan, making sure folks understand that. We'll be working with the equity.
Right. Sorry, microphone issues. Right. So, was that very clear to you? Was that really straightforward? Policies are never neutral. You're either explicitly anti-racist or you're upholding white supremacy. There is no middle ground. They're not talking about individual acts of racism because you might not see that. And earlier in the meeting, they confirmed that they didn't have any data on acts of racism. They had a number of 5 when asked how many racist acts happened, but they cited suspension and other data, and they said that the board is 93% white. And I thought to myself, and part of the questions in the comment here, or in my comments in the video, is if all systems built by white people are inherently racist, how can the board take that position and then put white kids together as for a group project, right? Or can a single white child produce a product that's not inherently white supremacist? Because their point is, if you are not actively anti-racist, you're upholding white supremacy. If you're not actively upholding anti-racism at lunchtime, that's white supremacist. You're just actively white supremacist. Through not doing anything at all, you're actively white supremacist. If you're teaching math, actively white supremacist. Here's the definition of critical race theory. Here it is from Britannica. Okay, so this is not me. Critical race theory. The view that the law and legal institutions are inherently racist, and that race itself, instead of being biologically grounded and natural, is a socially constructed concept that is used by white people to further their economic and political interests at the expense of people of color. According to critical race theory, CRT, racial inequality emerges from the social, economic, and legal differences that white people create between races to maintain elite white interests in labor market and politics, giving rise to poverty and criminality in many minority communities. Okay, so how can a board of education take a position that this is correct, this is the right way to go, and simultaneously teach our children in good faith that to produce things, to produce anything, right? If the systems that you build are inherently racist, why would you build any systems? Why would you continue to go to school? Why would you not be demoralized by that? If nothing that you can do is good, I mean, look at what's been happening to men, right? Nothing you can do is good. Everything you do is bad. So stop doing anything. Where are all the women working? Where are all the men? Right? And they're leaving secondary education because they're being told, because the education systems are not built for them. I'm generalizing very, very broadly here. There are a lot of men working all over the place, but there are very concerning signals and numbers, and the demoralization is happening in real time through media, through newspapers. I'm showing you the racist demoralization at this point in time, but the demoralization of men has been going on a long time. It's a whole other topic. Here's the systemic racist definition that they're operating by, and I want you to understand it. It's complicated, and I think there's a reason it's complicated, because they want it to be difficult to understand so they can scream racism about everything and say you just don't understand. Here it is. Social justice usage of the term racism or racist. Individual and institutional practices and policies based on the belief that a particular race is superior to others. This often results in depriving certain individuals and groups of civil liberties, rights, and other resources, hindering opportunities for social, educational, and political advancement. The National Multicultural Institute, that's the source. Here's New Discourses commentary. This is just the website I use to understand what they're talking about. As soon as I understood that they were using critical race theory, I went to find out what it was, and I came across this critique, and I thought this website was all right, so I'll share it. You can check out the About Them. I think they're just they say they're apolitical, so I don't know. Anyway, this is their definition, and I'm using it. Okay, New Discourse commentary. New Discourses is the name of the website. Critical social justice thinks about racism in a systemic fashion, sometimes phrased structural, though this may not mean quite the same thing. Though the system in question remains somewhat ambiguous, roughly meaning everything that happens, critical social justice theory details many specific types of racism under this systemic umbrella, including active racism, passive racism, cultural racism, institutional racism, aversive racism. It can even refer to the system of knowledge in place. See also epistemic, I didn't say that right, oppression, knowledge itself, or ways that things are spoken about, discourse. This means that in critical social justice theory, racism refers less to individual acts of racism and more to ways that the entire system, meaning everything to do with social organization, manifests in a way that privilege some races while disadvantaging others. And then here's the critical social justice will still understand racism in the usual ways while seeing it as proof of a broader system of racism. It also considers the following to be examples or proofs of systemic racism in action. Okay, so evidence or claims of any achievement gap between white people, usually non-Asian, people of color, between white people and people of color, usually non-Asian people of color, especially black people. These gaps could only occur if there is a system of racism that causes them. Thus, even when no discrimination or anti-discrimination policy in place or equity policies are in place, the existence of any disparity in outcomes must still be the result of racism that is hidden mysteriously throughout the system. Another one is the state in which no such achievement gap presently exists in any direction, although one against minority groups existed in the past. You will hear about this. You will hear this appeal to history when no problem exists in the present. So if it doesn't exist now, if it did exist, that's racism, and you're still racist. Participation in white culture, which can include keeping to a schedule, working to achieve a meeting agenda, relying upon science, evidence, and reason. See also master's tools. Oversay emotion. I don't know what that. Epistemic oppression and epistemic violence. Speaking common parlance English. See also linguistic justice, cultural sensitivity, and cultural responsiveness, and many other things that are not racialized. And yes, during this meeting, they talked about not having an agenda and working with people who don't appreciate that, and that's a very white culture thing to do, and that's forcing it on them. I was very surprised. Not positively liking non-white culture, especially black culture, or any particular aspect of these. See also cultural racism and new racism, or liking them while white. So it's racist if you don't like it, and if you do like it, racist too. And moving down, disagreeing with critical race theory, especially but not limited to being white. Disagreement with the theory about race is nearly always taken to be proof of upholding systemic racism. The underlying belief is that the theory is the only authentic voice speaking out about the realities of racism and fighting it, and thus disagreement with this voice upholds racism and is thus part of the system of racism. And then not believing the theory, not believing in critical race theory or critical whiteness studies or their claims, especially while white. Active ignorance, pernicious ignorance, white ignorance, willful ignorance, white innocence, white comfort, and white equilibrium. Crying while white, especially if female. Double, especially after being accused of being a racist under the systemic definition. So this is, it's certainly not comprehensive. It's certainly not everything there is to say, but this gave me insight onto what these people are talking about, right? Is the army racist? Is it systemically racist? Is there a policy in there that reads if there is a person of color who does X, Y, Z, that those people should be removed? If there is, I'm all for removing stuff like that. But I am not for saying that all systems built by white people are racist, because how can a white person or any person function in a society that is constantly saying you can't produce anything that isn't tainted, right? How can you move through your education while believing that anything that a white person creates is tainted with white supremacy unless certain imaginary check marks are made? It is offensive. It is unbelievable, right? And I can't believe it, but this is where we are, right? And I'm glad that this unlocked this for me, because people, I was saying I don't understand, and I'm glad that I understand now. It's way, way scarier than I understood a few days ago. Way scarier. Very, very scary. Moving on, because I think that that's quite enough about racism. Maybe I should just cut it off there. I'm just going to cut it off there. There's like 5 more tabs, but I'm just going to cut it off there. I think that's enough. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. And have a wonderful, wonderful day.